You're standing at the edge of something you didn't choose. Maybe it's loss that carved a hole in your chest. Maybe it's failure that stripped away everything you thought defined you. Maybe it's just the quiet, relentless weight of life refusing to go the way you planned. And in that moment, when the ground beneath you cracks, you're faced with a choice most people never consciously make. Do you let it break you, or do you let it build you? The Stoics understood something most of us forget. Pain isn't punishment, it's information. Struggle isn't evidence that you're doing life wrong. It's proof you're still in the game. Because the hardest moments, the ones that leave you gasping for air, wondering how you'll make it through the next hour, let alone the next year, those are the moments that reveal what you're actually made of. Not what you hope to be. Not what you pretend to be when life is easy. But who you are when everything falls apart. This isn't about toxic positivity. It's not about pretending suffering doesn't hurt. It does. Sometimes it tears you open in ways you didn't know were possible. But here's what the ancient philosophers knew that modern life tries to hide from you. That tearing open can become a doorway if you're willing to walk through it. Not around it, not over it, through it. 7 truths emerge from the wreckage, not theories, not philosophical abstractions. Real principles forged in the fire of actual human experience. The kind of wisdom you can't learn from books alone. You have to live it, bleed it, survive it. And once you do, you carry something unshakable. A clarity that doesn't flinch when the next storm rolls in. Because you've already been to the bottom and you know the secret. You can rise from there. Most people spend their entire lives avoiding discomfort. They build walls, create safety nets, chase certainty like it's the ultimate prize. But certainty is a myth. Control is an illusion. And the more you cling to the fantasy that you can protect yourself from pain, the more fragile you become. Because when pain inevitably arrives, and it will, you're unprepared. You haven't built the muscles that matter, the ones that let you stand in the storm without being destroyed by it. The first truth cuts deep, and it's one people resist the most. You don't grow in comfort, you grow in crisis. Think about every version of yourself that you're actually proud of. The moments when you showed real courage, real strength, real character. Were any of those moments easy? Were you sitting on a beach somewhere sipping a drink when you suddenly became braver? No. You were in the fire, you were scared, uncertain, maybe even broken. And you chose to keep moving anyway. That's where transformation lives. Not in the highlight reel, not in the success stories people post online. In the dark nights when no one's watching and you have to decide if you're going to quit or dig deeper. That decision made over and over in moments no one will ever know about. That's what builds the person you become. But here's what makes it even more challenging. The world won't validate this process. People around you might not understand why you're choosing the harder path. They'll offer you exits, shortcuts, ways to numb the pain. And sometimes you'll be tempted to take them. Because growth is uncomfortable. It's supposed to be. You're literally becoming someone new, and the old version of you fights that with everything it has. Epictetus said something that sounds harsh until you really understand it. He said we're disturbed not by events, but by our views of events. At first, that feels like blame. Like he's saying your pain isn't real, but that's not it at all. What he's pointing to is power. The power you have, even in the worst circumstances, to choose your response, not your feelings. You don't control those, but your response, your interpretation, the meaning you assign, that's yours. When someone betrays you, the betrayal happened. That's a fact. But the story you tell yourself about what it means, whether it proves you're unlovable or whether it reveals their character, not yours, that story determines everything that comes next. And you get to write it. Most people don't realize they're even holding the pen. This is where the second truth emerges, and it's connected to the first. Your interpretation creates your experience. Two people can go through the exact same event and come out completely different on the other side. One person sees evidence of a cruel world. The other sees an opportunity to become stronger, wiser, more resilient. Same event, different lens. And the lens you choose, consciously or unconsciously, shapes the entire trajectory of your life moving forward. You've probably seen this yourself. Someone loses their job and it destroys them. They spiral into depression, bitterness, a story about how the world is against them. Another person loses the same job and uses it as a catalyst. They start the business they always talked about. They pivot into a field they're actually passionate about. They later say it was the best thing that ever happened to them. What's the difference? Not the event, the interpretation. And this is where most people get stuck. They wait for the circumstances to change before they change their interpretation. They think, when things get better, then I'll feel better. But it works the opposite way. When you shift your interpretation, when you start seeing obstacles as opportunities and setbacks as setups, the circumstances start to shift. Not because the universe suddenly favors you, but because you're now operating from a completely different state of mind. That shift doesn't happen overnight. It's built through practice, through catching yourself in the old patterns and consciously choosing new ones. It's built through asking better questions, not why is this happening to me, but what is this teaching me? Not how do I avoid this pain, but how do I use it? The third truth might be the hardest to accept. You are not your circumstances, you are how you respond to them. Your identity isn't tied to what happens to you. It's forged in what you do with what happens. And that distinction, once you really grasp it, changes everything. Because it means no external event can define you unless you let it. You can lose everything and still be whole. You can be rejected, abandoned, broken down to nothing and still rise. Because the core of who you are, the part that chooses, that responds, that creates meaning, that part can't be touched by anything outside of you. It can only be surrendered, and surrender is always a choice. So when life hits you, and it will, remember this: the hit doesn't determine your future. Your response does. And your response is always, always within your control, even when it doesn't feel like it, especially when it doesn't feel like it. What happens next depends entirely on what you choose to do with this moment. And that choice, the one you're about to make, is where everything begins to shift. That choice, the one sitting in front of you right now, is where most people hesitate. They recognize the moment. They feel the pull towards something different. But then the familiar voice creeps in. The one that says it's too late. That too much damage has been done. That the patterns are too deep. The habits too ingrained. The story too far written to start over, but here's what that voice doesn't tell you. You're not starting over, you're starting from here. With everything you've learned, everything you've survived, everything that shaped you into someone capable of making this choice in the first place. The person you were yesterday couldn't have done this. But you're not that person anymore. You've already changed just by reading this far. The question is whether you'll honor that change with action or let it dissolve back into the noise. Action doesn't mean burning your life down. It doesn't require grand gestures or dramatic declarations. It starts smaller than that. It starts with one decision that aligns with who you're becoming rather than who you've been. Maybe it's setting a boundary you've avoided for years. Maybe it's saying no to something that drains you. Maybe it's finally starting the thing you've been planning in your head but never executing. Whatever it is, it's not the size of the action that matters. It's the direction. Because direction compounds. One aligned choice leads to another, and another, until one day you look back and realize you're living a completely different life. Not because everything changed at once, but because you stopped waiting for permission to become who you already knew you could be. You stopped negotiating with the old version of yourself and started building the new one. And that's where resistance shows up. Not at the beginning when you're inspired, not at the end when you've already transformed. It shows up in the middle, when the novelty wears off and you're left with the daily grind of becoming, when nobody's watching, when there's no immediate reward, when you have to choose your future self over your present comfort for the 100th time in a row. That's the crucible. That's where most people turn back, because they mistake that resistance for a sign they're on the wrong path. But it's the opposite. Resistance is proof you're on the right one. It's your old identity fighting to survive. It's the neural pathways that have kept you safe and comfortable for years, screaming at you to come back. And if you listen to that scream, if you interpret it as truth rather than noise, you'll stay exactly where you are. But if you can sit with it, if you can feel the discomfort without obeying it, something shifts. The resistance doesn't disappear. You just get better at recognizing it for what it is. A liar, a protector of the past, a voice that has nothing to do with your future. And the more you act despite it, the quieter it becomes. Not because it's gone, but because you've stopped giving it authority. This is what separates people who change from people who talk about changing. The ones who change understand that transformation isn't a feeling. It's a practice. It's showing up when you don't want to. It's doing the thing before you feel ready. It's making the aligned choice even when every part of you wants to default back to what's familiar. And over time, those choices stop feeling like battles. They start feeling like who you are, the shift from effort to identity. That's the goal, not to white-knuckle your way through life pretending to be someone you're not, but to practice the behaviors until they become you. Until discipline doesn't require willpower anymore because it's just what you do. Until boundaries don't feel uncomfortable because they're how you naturally operate. Until the new patterns are so ingrained that going back to the old ones would feel stranger than moving forward. That doesn't happen by accident. It happens through repetition. Through consistently choosing the harder right over the easier wrong. through understanding that every single choice is either reinforcing who you were or building who you're becoming. There's no neutral. Every moment is a vote, and you're either voting for your past or your future. Most people don't think about it that way. They think some choices matter and some don't. They'll make the big decisions carefully, but let the small ones slide. But it's the small ones that shape you. The decision to scroll for an hour instead of reading. The decision to skip the workout because you're tired. The decision to stay quiet when you should speak up. None of those feel significant in the moment. But string enough of them together and they become your life. And the reverse is also true. String enough aligned choices together and they become your transformation. Not because any single one was revolutionary, but because together they created momentum. And momentum is everything. It's the difference between trying and becoming, between wanting and having, between knowing what to do and actually doing it. So the question isn't whether you're capable of change. You are. The question is whether you'll choose it, not once in a moment of inspiration, but repeatedly, in the mundane middle when nobody's watching and nothing feels different yet. Because that's where transformation lives, in the gap between who you are and who you're becoming. In the space where discomfort meets decision. In the exact moment you're in right now. Reading this, deciding whether you'll let this be another thing you consume and forget, or whether you'll let it be the turning point you look back on and recognize as the moment everything shifted. The moment doesn't care about your history. It doesn't ask what you did yesterday or last year. It only asks what you'll do right now. And that's the gift most people overlook. They're so busy replaying their failures, so consumed by the weight of who they've been, that they miss the only thing that actually matters. This moment, this choice, this breath. Every second you're alive is a chance to begin again. Not to erase the past, but to stop letting it write your future. People think transformation requires some massive shift, a rock-bottom moment, a crisis, a dramatic revelation. But that's not how it works. Real change happens in the smallest moments, in the decision to pause before reacting, in the choice to stay present when your mind wants to escape, in the discipline to keep going when every fiber of your being wants to quit. These aren't glamorous moments. Nobody sees them, nobody applauds. But they're the ones that matter most. You don't need a perfect plan. You don't need ideal conditions. You just need to start where you are with what you have. Because waiting for the right time is just another form of resistance. It's your mind's way of keeping you safe, keeping you small, keeping you exactly where you've always been. And if you keep listening to that voice, you'll wake up 5 years from now in the exact same place, wondering why nothing ever changed. Here's what nobody tells you about change. It's not linear. Some days you'll feel unstoppable. Other days you'll barely recognize the person you're trying to become. You'll doubt yourself. You'll question whether any of it matters. You'll be tempted to go back to what's familiar because at least there you knew who you were. But that's exactly when you need to keep going. Not because it feels good, but because it's in those moments of doubt that your character is actually being forged. The Stoics understood this better than anyone. They didn't believe in waiting for inspiration. They believed in showing up regardless of how you felt. Marcus Aurelius wrote his meditations not as a public declaration but as private reminders to himself, because he knew that even emperors struggle. Even the most disciplined minds need constant reinforcement. Nobody is above the pull of old patterns. But some people have trained themselves to recognize that pull and choose differently anyway. That's the skill you need to develop. Not the ability to never feel resistance, but the ability to act despite it. To feel the fear and move forward. To notice the craving and let it pass. To hear the excuse forming in your mind and do the thing anyway. Because every time you override that initial impulse, you're rewiring your brain. You're teaching yourself that you're not controlled by your feelings. You're showing yourself that you're capable of more than you thought. Most people spend their entire lives being reasonable. They make sensible choices. They listen to their fears. They protect their comfort. And they wonder why their lives feel so small. But the people who actually transform, they've learned to be unreasonable. Not reckless, but willing to do things that don't make sense to anyone else. To get up at 5 in the morning when they could sleep in. To say no when everyone expects yes. To walk away from what's easy because they're committed to what matters. This isn't about becoming someone you're not. It's about becoming who you actually are beneath all the conditioning, all the fear, all the stories you've been telling yourself about why you can't. Because the truth is you can. You've always been able to. You've just been choosing comfort over growth so consistently that you've forgotten what you're capable of. Think about the last time you did something that scared you. Not terrified you, just pushed you slightly beyond your comfort zone. Remember how it felt after? That quiet pride, that sense of expansion, that reminder that you're stronger than you think. That feeling is available to you every single day, but only if you're willing to choose discomfort. Only if you're willing to do the thing that makes your palms sweat and your heart race. The life you want is on the other side of the choices you're avoiding. The relationship you want requires the conversation you're afraid to have. The body you want requires the workouts you keep postponing. The peace you want requires the boundaries you're too scared to set. Everything you say you want is waiting for you to prove you actually want it through your actions, not your words. And here's the part that might sting. Nobody's coming to save you. Nobody's going to hand you the motivation. Nobody's going to make it easier. This is it. This is your life. And every day you wait for conditions to be perfect is another day you're choosing to stay exactly where you are. The conditions will never be perfect. The timing will never feel right. You will never feel completely ready. So you might as well start now. Because the person you're becoming is being built in moments exactly like this one. In the space between knowing what you should do and actually doing it. That gap is where everything happens. That's where you either become someone new or stay someone familiar. And the choice is always yours, right now, in this moment. What will you choose? Most people think transformation is about the big moments, the dramatic decisions, the life-altering events. But it's not. Transformation happens in the 2 seconds between alarm and snooze, between craving and choice, between impulse and action. Those tiny moments you think don't matter, they're the only ones that do. You won't remember most of them, you won't feel them stacking up, but 6 months from now, you'll look back and realize you're not the same person. Not because of one grand gesture, but because of 1,000 invisible decisions that rewired who you are at the deepest level. This is what people miss. They wait for inspiration to strike. They wait to feel motivated. They treat their lives like they're waiting for a sign. But signs don't create change. Repetition does. Every morning you choose yourself over comfort. You're casting a vote for the person you're becoming. Every time you keep a promise to yourself that nobody else knows about, you're building trust with the only person who will be with you your entire life. You. And that trust compounds, it grows quietly. Until one day you realize you don't doubt yourself anymore. Not because life got easier, but because you proved to yourself that you show up. There's a concept in physics called momentum. An object in motion stays in motion. But here's what they don't tell you in science class. Starting is the hardest part, not because the task itself is difficult, but because you're fighting inertia. You're fighting every past version of yourself that chose the path of least resistance. That's why the first rep is always the hardest. The first sentence you write, the first minute of meditation, the first conversation you've been avoiding. But once you start, once you push through that initial friction, something shifts. Your brain stops fighting you. Your body stops resisting. And suddenly the thing that felt impossible 5 minutes ago is just something you're doing. That's the secret. You don't need to feel like doing it. You just need to start doing it. The feeling follows the action, not the other way around. Think about the last time you convinced yourself you'd do something later. How did that turn out? Did later ever come? Or did you just carry the weight of that undone thing until you finally forgot about it or gave up completely? Later is a lie we tell ourselves to avoid discomfort now. But discomfort now is always smaller than regret later. Here's what nobody tells you about discipline. It's not about being harder on yourself, it's about being honest with yourself, honest about what you actually want versus what you say you want. Because if you say you want to be healthy but you're eating like you don't, you're lying to yourself. If you say you want success but you're spending your time like you don't, you're lying to yourself. Your actions are the truth. Everything else is just stories. And the beautiful thing about truth is it cuts through everything. When you start living in alignment with what you actually want, life becomes simpler, not easier, but clearer. You stop debating with yourself, you stop negotiating. You just do what needs to be done because that's who you are now. That's the identity shift that changes everything. Most people try to change their actions without changing their identity. They try to force themselves to do things that don't match who they believe they are. And that's exhausting. That's why diets fail. Why New Year's resolutions die by February. Because you can't maintain actions that contradict your identity. But when you change how you see yourself, the actions become automatic. You don't have to force yourself to brush your teeth because you're someone who brushes their teeth. You don't have to convince yourself to show up to work because you're someone who shows up. The action isn't the hard part. The identity is. So stop trying to change what you do. Start changing who you are. And the only way to change who you are is to act like the person you want to become until it's no longer an act. That sounds simple. It's not. Because your brain will fight you every step. It will remind you of every time you failed before. It will show you evidence that you're not that person. It will make you feel like an imposter. Good. That discomfort means you're growing. That resistance means you're pushing past your old limits. Don't run from it. Move through it. Every single person who ever became someone different had to walk through that same fire. They had to feel like a fraud. They had to question if they were capable. They had to push through days when nothing felt worth it. But they kept going. Not because they were special. Because they decided their future mattered more than their comfort. You're standing at the same crossroads they stood at. The only difference is they chose to keep walking when it got hard. They chose to show up on the days they didn't feel like it. They chose to be unreasonable about their standards, and that's what made them different. Not talent, not luck. Just relentless, unglamorous consistency. So here's the question you need to answer. Not tomorrow, not when you feel ready. Right now. Are you willing to be uncomfortable? Are you willing to do the thing that scares you? Are you willing to choose growth over comfort so many times that it stops being a choice and starts being who you are? Because that's what this comes down to. A simple decision repeated until it becomes your identity. And once it becomes your identity, nothing can stop you. You've been taught that transformation takes time, that change is gradual, that you need months, maybe years, to become someone new. But that's not quite right. Change doesn't happen over time. It happens in a moment, a single decision that rewrites everything that follows. The time between decisions, that's just you living out the choice you already made. Think about the last time something shifted for you. Really shifted. It wasn't slow, it was instant. One moment you were tolerating something, the next you weren't. One day you accepted mediocrity, the next you didn't. What changed wasn't the circumstances, it was you. And it happened faster than you realized. That's the truth nobody talks about. We romanticize the journey, the process, the gradual climb. But every meaningful transformation can be traced back to a single moment when you decided enough was enough. The rest is just execution. Repetition of that decision until it becomes who you are. That's why some people change overnight while others spend decades stuck. It's not about capability, it's about decision. One person decides and never looks back. The other keeps reconsidering, renegotiating, reverting. They make the decision on Monday and unmake it by Wednesday. They commit in the morning and compromise by evening. And they wonder why nothing changes. Because they never actually decided, they just considered it. Real decision has weight. It closes doors, it eliminates options, it makes certain paths impossible because you've chosen a different one. That's uncomfortable. We want to keep our options open. We want the safety net. We want to change without losing anything. But that's not how it works. Every gain requires a loss. Every new identity requires letting go of an old one. You can't become disciplined while staying comfortable. You can't build strength while avoiding discomfort. You can't grow while clinging to who you were. So the question isn't whether you want to change. Everyone wants that. The question is whether you're willing to let go of what's keeping you the same. And for most people, the answer is no. not because they're weak, because they haven't counted the cost. They want the result without the sacrifice, the destination without the journey, the transformation without the discomfort. Life doesn't work that way. Here's what nobody tells you about becoming better. It's lonely at first. The people who knew the old you won't recognize the new you. They'll question it. They'll test it. They'll wait for you to slip back into familiar patterns because that's easier for them. Your growth makes them uncomfortable, not because they don't want you to succeed, because your change highlights their stagnation, and that's a mirror nobody wants to look into. So they'll pull, subtly, with jokes, with doubt, with reminders of who you used to be. And you'll have to choose, again and again, between fitting in and growing, between comfort and truth, between who they need you to be and who you're becoming. That choice never stops. Every level you reach presents a new version of the same test. Will you stay here where it's safe? Or will you keep climbing where it's uncertain? Most people stop. They reach a plateau and call it a peak. They achieve something and decide that's enough. Not because they've reached their limit, because they've reached their comfort threshold. The difference between good and great isn't talent, it's tolerance for discomfort. The willingness to keep pushing when everyone else stops. You've already proven you can do hard things. You've survived everything that's happened to you. You've made it through days you didn't think you would. You've rebuilt after falls. You've started over when it felt impossible. That strength doesn't disappear when things get hard. It's always there. The question is whether you'll use it, whether you'll stop waiting for permission, for perfect timing, for ideal conditions. Whether you'll finally accept that the only person who can change your life is you. Not tomorrow, not when you're ready, now. Because here's what happens when you keep waiting. Life passes, opportunities close, potential fades, and one day you wake up realizing you spent your whole life preparing to start living. That's the real tragedy, not failure, not falling short, but never trying, never deciding, never committing fully to becoming who you could be. So stop negotiating with yourself, stop making deals about starting Monday, stop waiting for the perfect moment that never comes. Decide right now, not what you'll do, who you'll be. Because once that decision is made, really made, the rest is just details. The actions follow the identity, the habits follow the decision, the life follows the commitment. This is your moment, not because it's special, because it's now. And now is all you ever get. You can spend it debating, planning, preparing, or you can spend it becoming. The choice is yours. It always has been. But the clock is ticking, and every second you wait is a second you don't get back. Decide now, act now, become now. Because the person you're meant to be is waiting on the other side of that decision. And they're tired of waiting. The hardest moments don't ask if you're ready. They just arrive. And when they do, you'll find out who you've been building yourself to become. Not in theory, in practice. Every choice you've made, every time you pushed when you wanted to quit. Every morning you showed up when staying down felt easier. All of it was preparation for the moment you're standing in right now. So stop waiting for permission to become who you already are. Stop negotiating with the old version of yourself. The transformation you've been seeking doesn't happen when life gets easier. It happens when you decide you're done being the same person who keeps waiting for different results. Decide now. Move now. Because the life you want is built by the person you're becoming in this exact moment.